Comandantes, apoyo en la 408, carretera La Barca, Ocotlán, en la pista.
Allá, güey, se me taparon la caseta de aquí de Ocotlán, güey.
¡Nos están agrediendo! ¡Nos están agrediendo! Mi teniente coronel, necesitamos apoyo. Necesitamos apoyo.
Solicitamos apoyo, solicitamos apoyo. ¡Apoyo! ¡Nos agredieron, nos agredieron!
Apoyo, nos están agrediendo. Nos están agrediendo acá. Apoyo.
Buenos dias, Gunners Collective TV. Back at it, you already know. Like a torta with some bad habits. Bye up. Let's get straight to that intro. Welcome back to the channel, and if you haven't already hit that like and subscribe button, make sure you go ahead and do that. Put your notification bell on all so that way you're directing the direction of the dope content that the gun stays kicking. And I appreciate you, man. I'm very humbled by all your support. So how did El Mencho get assassinated? How were they able to find him? What's the real story? There's a lot of stories out there on social media right now, but there's one story in particular that's sticking, right? That's actual and factual. That is the real reason why a man was caught. And it's very simple. It's the old age tale of how men always get caught up. Women, right? You know, that's a vice that a man has never been able to overcome. Women can take you to the top if you have the right woman, and they can tear you down, even if it's that right woman. You know, unfortunately, in this case, you had a man that, albeit is looked at, there's two sides to every coin. He's looked at two different ways. He's either a hero or a villain, depending upon your interactions with him, depending upon how you see what he was doing in Mexico, depending upon what you support. If you support criminal ways and criminal minds, then of course you were in support of El Mencho and hoping that his escape would be pura. But in this case, this time it wasn't. And it all stems from a woman. So it's being reported and put out there. The reason they were able to get to El Mencho was because of a lady friend of his. Because a girlfriend or a woman that he associated with repeatedly. They were able to track her down, follow her movements, and she led them right to El Mencho, to his base, to his camp, to where he was allegedly hiding. Now, I hate to use the word hiding with someone like El Mencho because I don't believe he was hiding. I believe he was staying out of the way. Okay, it's just like being on the run, which I've been on the run several times. It's a hard existence. But when you have the type of money, the type of communication, and the type of, you know, luxuries that El Mencho was afforded and that he had, it was a little bit different. Okay, so I wouldn't necessarily say he was hiding, but he just didn't want to be around certain entities and certain people. He didn't want to be around any fucking people that had 3 letters on their name. Okay, and that's a fact. What had happened was El Mencho's mistress or girlfriend, someone who he repeatedly was around, got discovered somehow, some way. Authorities were able to find out and verify who she was and who she dealt with. And they literally followed her movements every day until she led them right to El Mencho. Now, this was a perfect recipe for disaster for what he had going on. And it's not called slipping, you know, because this man, I'm sure, had a lot of security measures and buffers in between what he was doing to try to make things happen. But of course, man's downfall has always been woman. Ask Adam. He'll tell you all about Eve, right? Not about Steve, about Eve. And, you know, there's been plenty of times where men have dealt with women in life, and I'm not necessarily blaming her because she's innocent in all this. You know, she did not know she was being tracked. She did not know she was going to lead them ultimately to her boyfriend's demise. She wasn't aware, but I'm sure security was in place for her to at least be abreasted or acknowledge that, you know, this could happen. You know, when someone's the stature and in the leadership role of El Mencho, who's the most wanted man on earth at the time of his demise, right? You would think that he would put many more barriers in between himself and anybody that he has had association with just because, right? For safety and security reasons. But this was not the case. Now, whether she was able to go straight to him and authorities followed her, or she went through a whole bunch of series of events until she, ended up with him, it all ended up the same in his death, ultimately, right? Now, I'll say this, though. And this is a lot of facts. This woman should not be slandered or talked about or disrespected or threatened because they utilized her. This is what law enforcement does. They're going to utilize your weakest points. They're going to figure out exactly what your vice is. They're going to figure out what you like to drink, what you like to eat, what restaurant you like to frequent. These are things that you have to be aware of if you're in the game. These are things that you have to notice what they notice, right? And El Mencho got a good run. He lasted for a very long time at the top. Now, a lot of people have been talking about him without really understanding exactly who he was. El Mencho at one point in time was law enforcement, which makes it easier for a criminal or someone that's involved in what he allegedly was involved in to kind of wiggle. Knowing what the other team is doing is always going to help you win. Do you remember when the Raiders lost to the Buccaneers? That's because their coach knew what they did. When you know what someone else does and how they scheme and how they plot and how they plan and how they work, that makes it a lot easier to take advantage of the situation. And that's definitely what El Mencho was doing. Now, a lot of the cartel members in Mexico, right? A lot of them did have willings and dealings with law enforcement. A lot of the ones that are in the top tier, meaning the leadership roles. And then there are those that were just raised from the streets and brought something to the table that could be utilized in that life. It's unfortunate that in Mexico, the civilians, the people that are just out there working, that are just trying to do good in their country and that love their country, unfortunately are having to see the savagery and go through, the repercussions for the death of El Mencho. Who is El Mencho in comparison to? Pablo Escobar. If you guys remember in the 80s, Pablo Escobar was the man. You got youngsters running around nowadays wearing clothing with Chapo on it, with Pablo Escobar. All these notorious cartel figures that they're running around their cities supporting without understanding who these men really were, what motivated these men. Now, with Pablo Escobar, it was definitely money, power, and he wanted to be a political figure. He wanted to change the oppression that was going on in his country, and he utilized drugs and anything else he can get in his hands to gain the monies to do that. You can't necessarily think that these men are evil because evil deeds are done in their behalf. They are definitely not average Joe citizens. You have to understand when you're in that game, a game that was not started by them, but was given to them by the United States, right? When you are in a position of power and you could force moves and make things happen, you're going to be looked at. When they are ready to dispose of you, that's what's going to happen. Now, with El Mencho, he gained status from being a law enforcement officer to being part of a cartel to ultimately becoming leadership, allegedly, right? And his time was up. The savagery that was displayed on his behalf by people that might or might not have even seen him in real life, right? He got all the credit for that. It's kind of like Billy the Kid. He got credit for murders that he didn't even do, shootings he didn't even do. But because he was so notorious and because he was the look that they were looking for at the time, because he was an outlaw, he got accredited all these different things that were happening that he was not even associated with, but it just is the way of the world. When you're that man, everything's going to get put on your plate. And that's what was put on El Mencho's plate. It just boggles my mind that his security wasn't up to par enough to realize that this woman was going to lead authorities right to him. Now, she didn't do it out of free will. She wasn't snitching or telling. She didn't go to the authorities and say, hey, I know where El Mencho's at. She didn't contact authorities and work with them. Not at all. She was literally followed right to the fucking breaking point of El Mencho's demise. And that's just what it is, man. You know, there's a lot of people that so-called gangsters or people that, you know, talk that shit online saying, oh, she needs to get it. They should get her, this, and that. You can't blame what happened with her on her because she was unknowing. She's just a woman, man. You know, I'm sure that, I don't know if she had feelings for El Mencho. This was his girlfriend. But this was definitely someone who he's seen over and over again. They were able to pinpoint, like I said, her movements, and they just caught him. Now, they've been looking for El Mencho for a long time. There was a $15 million reward for him, so he was the most wanted man on earth. So it was only a matter of time before the government caught up to him. I wanted to talk about something else, something that piqued my interest, and I think the people of Mexico need to hear. Their president is different. Okay. I was always aware that Mexican presidents were just a figurehead. All presidents are a figurehead. They hold a certain amount of power, but not ultimate power. Okay. This woman, Sheinbaum, who was put in position to become the president of Mexico, I always wondered why. She's not a native of Mexico. Her ideology doesn't identify with the culture, yet she's the president of Mexico. Well, she went and did a press conference. And in her press conference, she said that she doesn't believe that force should be used against cartel members, period, because it's violating their human rights. Meaning that if they're to be engaged with law enforcement needs to arrest them and not take them out by any means. I agree with not hurting anyone if it's physically possible. If you could just apprehend people that are lighting these fires and hurting people and going door to door, killing people, I agree. But at the same time, what I don't agree with is you have to fight fire with fire. If someone is making threats to go door to door and behead American citizens and civilians, you have to take that into account and realize that their past history shows that they are willing to go that route and do that. And if they're saying on social media, making threats saying this is what we are going to do because of the murder of, and they believe the murder of their leadership, then you have to take that very serious. And as a president, it's your job to establish some type of security for the civilians and the regular people. And if you're saying, oh no, these guys have rights, absolutely, everybody has rights. But at the same time, it seems kind of fishy here that she's quick to, instead of, you know, talk about the rights that are being violated of the American people and the Mexican people and the communities out there. Because there are a lot of Americans that are in Mexico, people that have went and established a livelihood and a life in Mexico. Just like there's a lot of Mexicanos that have established a life and a livelihood in America, right? Being the country that we're side by side with, you would think that there's a lot of interaction, a lot of correspondence, a lot of relationship there. But it seems like when it comes to America and Mexico, there's always a little bit of a standoffish point. Now, it's being alleged that U.S. forces were involved in this incident and the demise of El Mencho, right? If that's the case, which I'm not even going to bullshit you guys, usually the U.S., their intelligence is aware of everything that's happening, especially with someone as high priority as El Mencho, right? Someone who the world was involved with the frequency of the world, meaning a lot of the things that moved and grooved in this world was due to that man and the position he played within his organization, right? He had his hands in a lot of things. And believe America was aware. Now, as far as did Delta Force or U.S. participate boots on the ground in this, and was their involvement to that degree, Mexico's not admitting that. U.S. is not admitting that, right? But the members of this organization tend to believe that's the case. They are the understanding, like I am of the understanding that things don't move without America say so. Things don't happen like that without America knowing, at least having knowledge of, right? You know, this is a big deal. People don't understand how bad it is in Mexico right now, how bad it was prior to El Mencho being killed, and how bad it is now. See, now it's just blatant. now it's offensive, right? They're on the offensive tip, not the defense. Right now, these guys as a collective are coming together, issuing warnings to Americans. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, if you're American, man, I don't care if you're Mexican American, a brother, man, white, whatever you are, don't go to Mexico. Not at this point, not for vacation. These guys, it's been reported, these guys are going to Cancun. These guys are going to all the destination spots that the youngsters like to go for their spring breaks. And they are pulling up and they're snatching people up out of their rooms. And if you're American, they're making an example. They're laying a demo down. Okay. When I went to Mexico, there's a different aura, right? Now that depends. Let me explain to you, because it's not like everyone's going to feel it. There's people in Mexico right now that are going to tell you, man, that they're living comfortable and it's not affecting them. And Mexico is a beautiful place. And they're absolutely 100% right. It is. I love the culture. I love the gente that are there, the strive, the way they work. Like, there's a lot of things to love in Mexico. Anyone who is of Mexican descent, raza, has that blood pumping through your veins, and you understand where I'm coming from. But also, it's a deadly place. It's a place where your cap can get peeled quicker than it's like Chicago all day, right? When I was in Mexico, the aura that I felt was death. Okay, when I got there, I realized right from day one, from the minute I crossed over the frontera, the border, right? I realized there was a different feeling, an uneasy feeling, a feeling of death. Okay, and it's hard to describe that feeling unless you've ever experienced it. And I just knew this was a whole different type of fucking area. I was thinking all my life, I went to Mexico when I was young, so I didn't really get to understand it. I remember some things, but I was in Zacatecas at the rancho. I didn't understand, exactly where I was at, what I was going through. And then when I grew up and then I finally went to Juarez, that's when I realized, wow, this is what these people are living in. This is what they're going through. And now it's worse. It's 1,000 times worse, especially right now today. Because what you have is civil war, basically. It's going to come to a point where people are going to decide to stand their ground against these cartel members, against even their own government, if they're not getting exactly what they feel they should be getting and what they deserve. And what they deserve is to live a life. Everyone deserves the freedoms to live a life, man, to make a choice. You shouldn't be bombarded in your own home. You shouldn't be confined to quarters in your own home. You shouldn't be not able to go out and have curfew set on you. You should not be able to go out and enjoy, the culture without worrying about if your head's going to still be on your shoulders. But right now is not that time. Right now, there's a lot of civil unrest, just like there's civil unrest in America. Right now, there's a lot going on because one man was so powerful, had so much juice, that the government didn't take into account that if they did what they did, and I'm talking about the Mexican government, if they did what they did, the repercussions for them actions, well, they're understanding and realizing it right now, and it's becoming a war zone. It's becoming much more than they anticipated. There's a lot of people that are online making different types of content. One guy got into my DMs yesterday and was like, all you Mexicans need to go back over there and support your people. I'm saying? He was a brother. He was a black dude that said this, right? He said, I'm from the FBA and Foundational Black America, which, that's their own entity and their own thing. And I don't disrespect them guys because they have their own reasons why they do what they do. But he was like, you border hoppers need to go back, take care of your business, go support your people, do like we've been doing for hundreds of years and supporting our people here. He's like, you need to go back to the country of your origin and do that. And I said, brother, you need to go back to the country of your origin too and help the Somalians, man, from them warlords that are out there. Right? He said, oh, you're being racist. I said, man, brother, you just called me a border hopper. Right? I don't never remember hopping no border only to Taco Bell, to make a run for it. The fact is, that's the type of idealism is and what's going on, the conversations that are being held. People are like, they don't care. They don't care about the Mexican communities, the raza, what they're going through right now. We got, we already know what's going on here in America, man, with the ICE and the deportations and everything, and people being scared to go to school, to go to work, to live, right? Whether or not they fucking came over illegally or not, that doesn't matter. What matters is people are scared, and you got to be compassionate and have a heart. That's what fucking matters. All the other shit, look, man, I believe if you're a criminal and you're not supposed to be here and you're doing bad, get the fuck up out of here. Okay, do your time like I did when I was doing criminal activity. But I also am a firm believer in, man, not tearing families apart. And if people are just trying to work and do good, leave them alone. Okay, so with that happening over here, and then now you got Mexican people being persecuted and American people that live in Mexico being killed and civil unrest, and as crazy as it's going, I'm talking about places being blown up and lit on fire, all on behalf of one man who is no longer with us, who some people will believe is a hero and some people will say was a villain. Look, I'm not here to support El Mencho, and I'm not here to advocate to go against his peoples or nothing. I think that, man, this is just a very unfortunate series of situations that has happened, and Mexico is paying the price for it right now. And the president seems to believe that the cartel members deserve more than the average citizen when it comes to, I guess, due process. You know, like I said, I don't advocate for violence. I don't say go out there and kill them, man. But if someone's coming at me with an axe or a fucking chainsaw, guess what? It's you or me, man. Hopefully not me. I'm not out there seeking the destruction of others, but myself as well. You know what I mean? I don't want that. Anyways, man, El Mencho was killed because a woman that he dated, they were able to follow her, get together a plan, go in, and of course, El Mencho and his people stood their ground. There was a lot of shooting and chaos, and unfortunately, he lost his life. But I truly believe that man went out the way he went in, right? He went in understanding that life is a very dangerous life. And ultimately, man, someone like El Mencho, I don't believe could be broke. I don't believe that they could take him easily. Just like Pablo, these guys are on a different level, right? There's not a prison that can hold these guys. There's not a situation where they're going to break or conform to the realities of the authority. They've been in a position of power for too long to listen to anybody. You know, if you've listened to past audio of Mencho when he was talking to that chief of police, the way that he talked to law enforcement with respect, but at the same time with the prominence of a man who is in command at all times, you would understand. Anyways, man, let me know what you guys think. Downfall of El Mencho was this chick, but she shouldn't be blamed. She didn't tell on him. She just got tracked, and that's how they got him, ultimately. Thumbs up or thumbs down. Heavy's going to be the head that wears the crown. I'm going to continue to strive, struggle, and strive for what I truly believe in. That's the betterment of all people. This video is sponsored by Barrio Liquors out there in Turlock, California. If you're ever in the area, pull up, man, and go get you something cold to drink at the Barrio Liquors. #1 Barrio Liquor store in Turlock, California, and the Central Valley. Pull up, right? Also, this video is sponsored by Sticks and Stones Yard Service, man. Go hit the homeboy up. Tap in, man. Look him up. Google him. And if you're in his immediate area, work a deal with them, man. Support your local businesses. This is the gun. Bang, bang.